Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Contrast. My name is Allan.
And I'm Nisha.
On this podcast, we talk about movies and the books that they're based on.
The catch is you watch the movie and I read the book with a few exceptions.
Yes, that's right. And today we're going to be talking about a real classic.
The Masque of the Red Death.
That's right. This is a story that is, 180 years old now at this point?
Oh, I guess so. I didn't think about that.
Published in 1842.
Yeah, by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes,
if you did
of
not
course. Classic writer of American short stories, mostly.
Yes, and some poetry.
Yes.
Quite a bit of poetry.
And obviously very linked to Gothic horror.
In fact, I believe, and this is from my creative writing teacher, Henry.
Shout out.
Shout out to Henry. Apparently, he had this thing about writing things that are short. It's almost like he had a vendetta against novels. Like, they're too long. You need to be able to tell things quickly.
Yeah, I'm not like 100% certain about all of his various, opinions when it comes to writing and things. I just know that he was a very opinionated person.
Yeah.
And that a lot of his stories even were kind of like in response to critics of his day or this, which is not like, super out of the norm or anything for a writer. But
yeah,
I just know he has that kind of,
Je ne sais quoi.
No, he has that reputation as being, really opinionated.
Yeah, for sure. And he was opinionated. And that was actually something that's interesting with this story, which I'll just mention real quick, is that there's this debate as to whether it's an allegory or not.
Right.
And he was like, no, I don't like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but it's also like, some of his stories feel so allegorical.
Yeah.
It's been a long time. I definitely had a period as a kid where I was obsessed with his writing. Mm-hmm. I read his short stories a lot, at least the more popular ones. And like, even then, it felt like this is saying something else, even at the time I wasn't able to understand it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is kind of noted as having this, I don't know, like a aversion to that type of writing. But I don't know, when you read about it, and again, my knowledge is pretty light when it comes to that, it feels more like he doesn't want it to be too on the nose.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more.
He doesn't want to have, and that's actually in this Wikipedia article, my favorite place to reference. They say that there's clearly no like moral that's clearly said in the story. And it's just a lot of his stories you can read. I don't want to say superficially, because there's nothing wrong with reading something and not necessarily looking for a deeper meaning, but at more of a surface level of like, this is the story and you can accept it as presented. Some stories you read and you're like, oh no, there's way more here. But his, It's easy to accept as what they are.
And this is something we've talked about repeatedly, is that, intention matters. It's definitely part of the conversation, especially from the creator of something. But at the same time, it's not everything.
No.
A lot of some of the greatest works, or certain situations in a movie or writing or this or that, like they're accidental. They're not even intended.
Yeah. And that's actually like what you're doing in English class. A lot of people ask, like, what's the point of analyzing the blue curtains in English class? And it's that you're not analyzing what the author intentionally put there. You're looking for the things that their biases influenced, that they as a person put in by accident, motifs and things that they didn't even realize they had. Like, you're actually trying to examine this on a deeper level and get to know this person on a deeper level, which is frankly not something I really realized until I was older. And, I sort of wish I had taken more advantage of that in high school.
Sure, but it's something that takes time for it to grow on you and understand,
Yeah, and no high school teacher ever tells you that.
No, that's true. Which is kind of just the nature of the system, I guess, that they're looking for kind of a certain answer or, putting their own viewpoint on it, and that's what they're teaching you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and also you're learning about your teacher's bias.
It's true.
When they tell you to examine something, you're not just learning the author's bias, you're learning your teacher's bias.
It's all part of it. And that's why I like consuming things in so many different forms. That's why I like reading criticism. It's why I like watching things for myself or reading things for myself,
Yeah.
Because you're getting multiple viewpoints, and that's the point of it, right?
Yeah.
The creator is not the only viewpoint. The audience is also a viewpoint.
Absolutely. And their interpretation and everything. And I think this is a really interesting, actually, to touch on right now, especially since both of what we watched was fairly short. What we're talking about is fairly short.
Yeah, this is an easy one.
We'll kind of ramble a little bit
here.
Of
course.
But something really interesting in most English classes is a teacher will talk about different interpretations of the same thing. Mm-hmm. Henry is a very, he's a writer first. He's not a literary teacher or examiner or researcher first. He's a writer first. And he says that if writers are not conveying something so that everyone sees it the same way, or at least similarly, obviously there is some, like if I say the wall is white, some people might picture stark white, some people might picture off-white. He says if you don't convey that, you're not doing your job as a writer. Which is very interesting, I think.
Well, that's interesting. I'd love to hear more about what he thinks about that. Maybe not as part of this conversation, but I, on the very surface of that, I take a little bit of offense to it. Not offense, but
Yeah.
I don't necessarily immediately agree with that, just because I think that depends on how you want to react to the audience's reaction of your work. I don't think it's inherently a shortcoming for you not to include almost like those instructions for how to understand it.
Yeah.
If you want them to understand it a certain way.
Yeah.
But there's nothing inherently wrong with making it a little broader or more open-ended.
And I think that, and this is a little bit more how I interpret what he's saying, but if you're not going to describe the things, you have to be intentional about it. So if you're going to leave the audience with questions, it needs to be intentional. Or if you're going to leave the audience viewing things in different ways, it needs to be intentional, right? And usually he's talking about it in a little bit broader sense of if you go into a movie and one person's terrified and one person is laughing, you've probably done your job wrong.
Sure. Yeah, there is a certain level of tonal control that you should have. Yeah, absolutely.
But I do think, but maybe we should just invite him on the podcast. I do think there is room to pose questions or pose scenarios and sort of let people interpret it. But I do think it needs to be intentional. Otherwise, if it's not intentional, it'll just be confusing, probably. But I think that it's such a valid way of writing is to pose questions and to pose scenarios and to leave things open-ended.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And people are always going to have different reads on that, no matter what. But, no, I think it's just kind of my penchant for especially movies that are, a little quieter, a little less direct in their message. Mm-hmm. And I tend to gravitate towards those kinds of things where it's not even the movie itself that I'm getting the most out of. It's what it makes my brain do internally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is not, it's, I think, an intention of many of those films. But it's not trying to latch onto one thing. It's saying, here, I'm presenting this situation or this type of art to you for your brain to interpret it in whatever way fits for your situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that this is something that's kind of interesting about us is that you approach art very thoughtfully. You even like abstract art a lot. And you like these things that make you think and really tickle your brain. You get deep in the research and the weeds for these things. And being a writer, maybe it's a little bit shameful to say, but I really typically don't automatically dive as deep unless it really, really catches my attention. But for you, I feel things grab you like that a lot faster than they do me.
Sure. Yeah. And I think there's some level of that just being, different people's natures.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also just different things speak to people in different ways,
Yeah, absolutely.
So while a movie might do that for me, it might not do that for you, but something else might, a painting might, or this might,
Yeah, for sure. I would say the biggest example of that would be abstract art, where you were look at this, and do you not I remember looking at an art, with you. And you were like, this is amazing. I wish I could remember
I don't remember
who the artist was, but they had taken like passport photos or something of immigrants or undocumented immigrants or something, or their own family. Mm-hmm. And it was on this huge canvas, lots of reds and yellows. And it was very abstract. And you were just experiencing it.
Oh, yeah. I think that was something at Portland Art Museum.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was in Portland. And you looked at me and you were like, are you not getting this? I was like, I don't know. It's just colors. Yeah, it looks fine. But I didn't get it didn't mean anything to me.
Okay.
So abstract art is quite lost on me. And that's not to say that I don't like try to look at it and be like, this is like what is here. And I also very much understand it as a form of expression.
Yeah.
But like, that's like the best example I can give of how our brains work. Like you saw that art and you were like, look at this. And I saw that and I was like, yep.
Yeah, I don't know. It's definitely an interesting difference in approach. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I said, like intention is important, but honestly, it's like, I don't know, just to throw a random number out there, it's like 25% of the piece of art to me is the author's or the artist's intention.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's very fair because I really, like I said, I do think there's a lot you can learn about the art and the artist and critics and audiences through examining and seeing their biases and seeing them be revealed and stuff like that. Like, I mean, I guess for a big thing for me would be watching, like, we watched Jurassic Park recently, which we know there is a book for, by the way.
Yes.
It is on our list.
It's on the list.
But we are not doing it yet. But like, I like would see the subtle sexism. And like that tells me even when there's outright talking about sexism in it. And I love that they have Laura Dern be like, we're going to talk about your sexism later. Like that's a great moment.
Yeah, right.
In the movie. But there were still moments where I was like, why is her face not banged up? She has been through so much.
Right. Yeah.
She
like at the end, she still looks so nice.
She's like beautiful, clean face. And everyone else looks like garbage.
I'm also just going to point out that I think that this is a little bit of a seed that was planted from the Lego Jurassic Park game.
Oh, yeah.
In which you were very offended that only Alan Grant could deal with the dinosaur bones.
No, it wasn't just that. He was the only one who could do anything.
Yeah, in that first level, yeah.
It was the second level. Laura Dern was useless. She was just like running around, and I was like, I guess I'll just go collect coins. Yeah. So there is that. And like now seeing the movie, I like get it because she's a she's a
paleobotanist.
Yeah, she's a botanist and he's a dinosaur guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that kind of stuff, like you see it and you like, oh, outwardly, they truly maybe genuinely believe in equality. But somewhere inside of themselves, they are still fighting sexism that they learned and they are probably working to unlearn. I will give them the benefit of the doubt. But it's stuff like that you notice. And those are the biases I love to find. And like not necessarily judge people for it.
No,
but like to just be like, look, they need to examine deeper.
Right. And I think that's a really important thing to recognize about like pretty much any kind of bias is that it's okay. You're not trying to defeat having a bias. You're trying to defeat letting it color your opinions and how you live.
Yeah. And
right. You're always going to have some sort of bias that your like reptile brain immediately clicks to.
Yeah.
But it's recognizing it and not allowing it to control you that is what matters.
Yeah. And then, like, it's so deeply ingrained. You've been learning this stuff since you were born, and it's not even necessarily your parents' fault. You know, it's their biases coloring you.
Yeah.
So anyway,
we're getting very off topic
so
here,
off
but
topic,
you know, it's still fun conversation.
It is a fun conversation. And like I said, this is probably going to be a little bit of a short episode.
Yeah.
But I want to say that, you know what? I'm going to say it now. We promised that we would talk a little bit about Vincent Price's cookbook at the end of the last episode. I completely forgot to look it up.
Yeah.
But I do want to give a little shout out and say that he has written like 3 or 4 cookbooks with his wife.
Amazing.
And he had like a show. And the stuff looks pretty interesting. There's like beetroot and onion supper special, blueberry muffins, chicken thighs, chicken vermouth with rice, chili. You know, there's lots of really cool stuff.
Yeah,
there's like a curry that I looked at briefly and I was like, well, that's embarrassing.
I'm sure you're not getting anything that would particularly, you know, spark a creative interest in the year 2025 from his cookbooks. But, you know, I'm sure there's some interesting, fun, classic stuff in it.
Yes. And you know what? We're absolutely going to be talking about Vincent Price again. So
of course,
we will keep this cookbook on our radar. Yeah. So don't worry, we're not going to forget about it.
Yeah. No, he's not going anywhere in terms of being a topic of conversation on this show.
Okay, so I read The Masque of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes, you did.
Originally published in 1842 as The Masque, M-A-S-K, of the Red Death, a fantasy. Later revised and some things add, and then published as what we know, The Masque of the Red Death, M-A-S-Q-U-E. And I just want to mention that MASQUE both does mean the mask on your face, but also means a party.
Right.
And
a masquerade.
I actually think it's kind of a double entendre because he could have said like the fete of the Red Death if he wanted it to just be party. So I think he intentionally used that. But he does also mean party, I believe.
Yes, of course. No, I think that the title was changed specifically to make it a little more ambiguous.
Yeah.
With the double meaning.
That makes sense. And you watched...
Yeah, so I watched 2 different films. One is a little looser of an adaptation, a very, very early one. So that is The Plague in Florence, it's called. It was a German silent film released in 1919.
Wow. I thought it was 1917.
No, 1919.
Okay.
So this is by far the oldest movie that, well, I guess Phantom of the Opera wasn't too far ahead of it. But this is definitely the oldest movie and story that we've talked about on this podcast so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this one it was an interesting one. It was a little hard to find. You I think got a kick out of me trying to I found a version on YouTube, but then it turned out to not have English translated subtitles for the title cards or the dialogue cards.
Yes, because this is the era where they were silent films, so you had to have your dialogue in written on the screen.
Yes, for anyone not familiar, there's no spoken dialogue, right? There's just typically music to overscore it, and then you get some dialogue cards here and there. This one's pretty light on the dialogue cards, I have to say.
Yeah.
So that's why it wasn't too much of a difficulty. But anyway, I tried to find versions other places, and they were either, completely silent with no music, which was no fun, like on the Internet Archive, which is a favorite site of mine, but, just didn't give me what I was looking for. So this was a version that its only problem was it did not have English. It only had Russian subtitles.
Which you do not speak.
I do not speak Russian. And they were baked in. So there was nothing I could do about it. But anyway, so I just sat there with my Google Lens Translate open from German to English, and I scanned the screen every time dialogue came up.
Yeah, and that was pretty funny to see you lying on the couch and there's a movie on the TV and you're staring at your phone. Really intently too. It's not like you're mindlessly scrolling. It's like you were looking at your phone.
Yeah, I feel like you really got a kick out of that.
Yeah, I got a kick out of this whole thing.
I'm sure. Anyway, we'll, get into more details about that, but this was notably a script written by Fritz Lang.
Fritz Lang?
Yes.
Okay.
Very legendary filmmaker. He did Metropolis, M. He directed some noirs that you've probably seen. The Big Heat, I know you've seen.
Oh, I have seen The Big Heat.
He directed that much later on, but he was a big screenwriter and director starting even in the silent film era. So his noir stuff was actually towards the end of his career.
Yeah, wow.
But yeah, so he kept going into the 40s. But yeah, so this was kind of an earlier one for him. He had done some writing before this, but he hadn't directed anything yet. So this was directed by Otto Rippert.
I don't have it in front of me. I'm sorry.
But anyway, yeah. So this was, again, an early one, and it seems like it was even partially lost up until maybe 20 years ago.
Okay.
That some of it was recovered, and some of the negatives had been lost and then recovered, and I don't know. There was a whole thing about that, but it was properly restored in its full capacity.
Oh, so this is the one with Vincent Price.
No.
Oh no, you watched 3 movies.
I'm still talking about the 1919 movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I thought you had moved on. I'm sorry.
But yeah, so this was, again, kind of a looser adaptation. This is more historically based. And so it takes some of the elements from the Poe story, but it's really placing it in the Black Plague outbreak in Italy back in the 14th century.
Okay.
But yeah, so we'll get into some of the details about how that goes. But this is pretty lengthy for a silent film from this era. It's not unheard of that movies were that long, but I was surprised at how much was going on in it. There was quite a lot. But yeah, so the other one I watched is probably the most well-known telling of this story, which is the 1964 film. This was directed by Roger Corman and stars Vincent Price as Prince Prospero.
Okay.
who is, again, not a character in the 1919 film. There are like kind of stand-in characters, but none of the characters are the same.
Okay. So I looked up Fritz Lang because I was curious. Have you been to his Wikipedia page?
Probably.
It's like a photo of this old gangster-looking dude with an eye patch.
Yeah.
I highly recommend you look up Fritz Lang.
Fritz Lang's a badass.
And also, he had a wife named Lily Latte.
That I did not know.
Yeah, so this is a hole I'm going to go down later.
No, that's definitely what kind of cemented me wanting to do that film for this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always like a little intrigued to expose myself to more silent film era stuff. And, you know, especially if I think it might be like an interesting retelling of a story.
Yeah.
But that was kind of the last nail in the coffin for me on this, was like, I have to see this because Fritz Lang wrote it.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay. Yeah, that's really cool. And like sometimes it feels like the 1920s are so far removed, especially in a film context, because between the 1920s and the 1940s there was just massive like revolution.
Oh yeah.
Of sound, video quality, music, writing, acting, scoring, everything was revolutionized completely. And so sometimes it feels so far away, but to think of this guy who, like, you know, did both.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me curious, like, how many directors were in both? You know?
Right. Yeah. There were definitely some that bridged it, you know.
Yeah, there had to have been.
But that was a huge thing, is that a lot of, you know, well-regarded creatives of the time were not able to move from silent films to talkies. Like, it ended their career because they didn't know how to adapt.
Yeah, it's a completely different, almost a completely different art form.
Mm-hmm. And it just like changed overnight, basically.
Did it?
You know? Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the jazz singer came out kind of as a surprise. And, you know, people didn't know how to take it. They were like, oh, this talking thing is just going to be a fad, you know? Like, you know, the way people kind of dig their heels in at things that they're used to. Even though on paper, especially so many years later, it's like, well, yeah, of course people want the dialogue live. Like, why would you think a dialogue card is better?
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
But it was just such an overnight thing. There's a great scene in the movie Babylon that came out a couple years ago.
Okay.
That's kind of talking about that, where it's, you know, this whole like spanning multiple decades of early Hollywood, but it talks about it follows a couple of these actors as they try to transition into talkie films.
Okay.
And so, like, there's this great scene of them doing the first one in response to the jazz singer, and how they have to just keep redoing things because someone coughed in the back somewhere.
Yeah.
Or, like, you know, because they didn't have any of the sound balancing equipment or something. Or, you know, someone missed their mark, so they have to redo the whole thing.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's a truly phenomenal scene, but yeah.
Yeah, well, and I bet a lot of people were also learning that you have to be quiet on a set now.
Yeah.
Like backstage in theaters, you had to be quiet. Suddenly, you didn't have to be quiet on sets anymore. Yeah. And then you had to be quiet on sets
Exactly,
again.
Yeah. It was just a lot to get used to so quickly. Because, again, everyone just started scrambling. Like, there were productions that were already happening for silent films that ended up transitioning to talkies because it was so sudden.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And I mean, even things like makeup had to change as we went into these higher quality movies, because you look at these old silent films and they are so theatrical how they look.
Yes, absolutely. Everything is completely just up to 100.
Yeah.
You know?
And some of that has to do with the fact that their film quality was just not that good.
Yeah, of course.
So, like,
you have to make it pop in some way.
If you've ever seen a stage actor up close, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
But from a distance, they look amazing.
You have to be able to see it from the boxes, you know?
And so they were still learning, first off, how to balance that. But also, just the film quality was not very good. So, just everything changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it's a fascinating time period. Definitely the director of this film, Otto, he was very much, I think he was coming towards the end of his career anyway.
Okay.
But he did not really continue into the 30s.
Yeah.
This was one of the later ones he made, but he was a very early filmmaker. So he was, I think, releasing movies in like 1905. You know,
they made movies in 1905?
Yeah, the first thing ever put to film was like 1896.
What the heck? Wow.
Yeah.
I kind of just was like, film started in the 20s.
No.
okay, my film history is not great. Got it.
I mean, and of course, those early days, we're talking like they were, 2 to 5 minute films.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Someone had to crank the thing by hand.
So, but that's getting back to what we were saying. Like that to me is always striking, especially like a pre-1920s film being nearly 2 hours is striking to me.
Yeah, it was 1 hour 47 minutes.
Yeah, something
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is an interesting story to adapt because there's not a lot that happens.
Right. You have to take some, liberties with it.
Yes. And even more so, it is shorter than everything it was adapted into. Most, if not all, just most of the works we've talked about have been books that become movies.
Yeah.
You have to cut things out. You have to take out characters.
Yeah, this is like the other way.
Yeah, this is the absolute opposite. I actually don't know how long the story is, but it's not long. It's only a couple pages kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you read it in 10 minutes?
I think it took me maybe 20.
Yeah.
But I was really just taking my time.
Right.
And a lot of it is exposition about what's going on and explanation and description. Mm-hmm. The actual action is there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Which is really, really fascinating that anyone would try to make a adaptation. So something I did learn though is that The Masque of the Red Death was probably based on a book called The Castle of Otranto.
Yes. Which is one of the OG Gothic horror works.
Yeah, it's by Horace Walpole, and a lot of people say it was the first Gothic. Yeah. A lot of people say that it was the first Gothic novel from 1764. And I wondered how much these were actually adaptations of that, or if these authors actually decided to lean into some of that story, because it is about a family that has a castle and there's a curse on the castle and people are trying to get married and getting murdered left. It's very, very 1700s drama kind of story.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about that. I was going to ask you what you thought they might have added to these stories, to judge it up a little bit.
Well, a lot.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. So as we talk about this, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind.
Okay. I'm not familiar with it. I've never read it. I only know of its existence. So.
Well, boy, do I have good news for you.
You are familiar.
And I'm not. I'm a little familiar, but you're about to be familiar with it.
Okay.
Because there's a movie.
Oh.
So it is on our list.
Fantastic.
It's also a very short story. But let me just, I guess, give a little rundown of what the story is about.
Mm-hmm. Briefly, I did not finish talking about the movies.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Why don't you go on and then you tell me when you want me to go on?
Yeah. So I started talking about the 1964 version. So again, this was directed by Roger Corman, starring Vincent Price. This is, again, probably the most well-known adaptation. It was one of, I believe, 7 or 8 collaborations between Price and Corman of adapting Poe stories.
Yeah.
They did a whole series of them.
So we'll be back.
Yes. However, most of them are much looser adaptations. I think this is the closest, but that's probably just because the story is so light, like you said.
Yeah.
So it really incorporates everything that's in the story pretty directly.
Okay.
It just adds to instead of takes away, of course.
Yeah.
But so this was probably the one that Corman said he wanted to do the most. This and Fall of the House of Usher are his 2 favorite Poe stories.
All right.
And so he actually started working. I mean, he worked with a lot of other writers to get the scripts going for this, and some of the other movies as well. But this is one of the first ones that he started working on, but it was one of the last ones released.
Oh, okay.
So I think they had started releasing these, and I don't remember which the first one was. I didn't write it down, but it's sometime in the late 50s. And so this was, I think, the second to last of those 8 that they did in terms of release. But he had been working on it since before then. The problem was that he felt he had to delay releasing it because the story does share some DNA with the movie The Seventh Seal, which was released in, I think, 1957.
Okay.
The very famous Ingmar Bergman movie.
Okay.
It's obviously much more complicated than just this story, but it still deals with like a masked figure who turns out to be Death, kind of following this guy around.
Oh, so yeah.
So there's a lot of shared DNA, especially in the way that Corman clearly wanted to portray this story. So he ended up pushing it off on purpose so that those comparisons didn't get made.
That's very fair.
Yes. And it's unfortunately like remained Ingmar Bergman's most popular movie, probably.
Oh, dear.
So, I mean, it's still to this day like one of the most widely regarded movies. So he never really got to fully escape that because it just lived on. But
at least he can also say like Masque of the Red Death. Like this was a thing.
Yes.
It's like, I'm not copying this. This is clearly based
Yeah. I mean, I've seen both movies. Of course, there are similarities, but they feel unique.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So I think it was just his perception of it. You know, he didn't want people to think he was copying.
Yeah.
But yeah, so those are the only two I watched. There's a couple other that are worth mentioning. So there was what is not considered a direct adaptation, but rather a remake of Roger Corman's movie. Was released in 1989. He was also a producer on that movie. Just kind of skipped it because it just seemed like a worse version of the one he had already made.
All right.
So,
and it didn't have Vincent Price.
It did not have Vincent Price in it. I forget who plays Prince Prospero in that one, but just kind of like any of the reviews you read about it, it's just kind of like, well, it's not as interesting and it doesn't look as good and the acting's worse. So it's just like, I didn't feel like it was a worthwhile piece of this conversation.
That's too bad.
But just one to mention. And then notably, so that was released in 1989. The very same year, another movie came out with the title Masque of the Red Death. But this was not an adaptation or a remake at all. Basically, this was just a generic run-of-the-mill slasher movie that was set at a party that was a masquerade ball. And it was like to celebrate the story. So like someone threw a ball to honor the story of Masque of the Red Death. So it was like related in that way, but none of the actual happenings occur.
Okay.
It's just a slasher movie that happens at this party.
Okay. Oh, okay. So yeah, that one's not really worth.
Not really worth. There's like another animated movie. I think it was a Czech animated movie in like 1969 or somewhere around there. But outside of that, that's pretty much the only ones that have been put to film. So these were really the only two I felt like were, substantially worthwhile.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you want to see us review some of the others, let us know. Leave comments, tell us, and maybe we will.
I mean, I'm always game for a dumb slasher movie.
Yeah, and honestly, comparing it to the Masque of the Red Death,
yeah,
we can have a lot of fun with this, believe me. We are not above a little chaos, as you maybe realize in this episode.
Anyway, so those are all of the ones I watched and all the honorable mentions. So, yes. So tell us a little about the story itself.
Okay, so, I mean, I can basically just detail the whole story in like a few sentences.
Please.
Okay, so there is a plague referred to as the Red Death ripping through this town. I think it's supposed to be widespread, but it's ripping through this town. It causes people to like bleed from the pores and they die within half an hour.
Yeah.
And this Prince Prospero decides that rather than helping people, he's going to invite all his buddies to his abbey and lock themselves inside with the entertainment and food and everything they need to survive this plague. And he'll just let the peasants figure it out.
Yep. On the other side of the wall.
Yeah. Walls are notoriously good.
Of course, they always work.
Yeah. Then he decides to hold a masquerade. This is like 2 years into it or something like that.
Is it that long?
It's maybe not 2 years. I might be stretching, but it is some time after they've been there. They've been there for a really long time.
I mean, even months later would still be substantially.
Yeah. And they throw a masquerade and there's all these colorful rooms, which there's like all sorts of conversation about like the first room is blue and it signifies birth. And then people are like, but also Edgar Allan Poe didn't believe in doing that kind of stuff.
Right.
But they go through all these colors. The first room is blue. The last room is black. Yeah. And they have these big windows and they shine lights through them. And every room, this is a huge part of the story is what I'm describing right now. Mm-hmm. Every room has a huge window, the color of the room, except for the black room, which has a red window. And no one likes that room and no one wants to go into it during this party because it's creepy. Mm-hmm. Fair. As they party and in the midst of their revelry, as it says on Wikipedia.
I feel like the best term for this is merrymaking.
Merrymaking.
That's like, that word crossed my mind like 1,000 times during this movie.
In the midst of their merriment, of their merrymaking, someone appears dressed as the Red Death and like runs through the halls. Mm-hmm. And Prince Prospero is the only one who confronts him and then dies. Mm-hmm. Like before he can do anything, he just like falls over and dies. Mm-hmm. And these people try to like seize the Red Death and like rip his costume off, and there's nothing inside. Ooh. Nothing tangible inside, they say. So it's kind of up to you to, I guess, figure out who it is. Like, is it death? Is it actually the Red Death? Is it just a ghost? Like, what is it?
And this is what I'm talking about with like, you cannot say that there's no allegory here. Even if Poe didn't sit here and be like, this is an allegory for death. It's an allegory.
Yeah, it is of some kind. So the guests all die.
Yeah.
After that. And that's literally the whole story.
Yeah.
And there is conversation about his wife was suffering tuberculosis at the time.
Yeah. Well, that's the question. What is the Red Death supposed to be? Is it completely made up? Is it just a parallel to the Black Death? Is it tuberculosis? Because both his wife had it and was dying of it and then died later of it while he wrote it.
Yeah.
His mother had it and died.
His father, his brother.
Yeah. So basically his entire family was wiped out by tuberculosis, which shares a lot of the same kind of similar, at least visual impacts and symptoms.
Yes.
To what he describes. So that's what I would lean towards. Especially since it had such a close place to him in his life.
Do you know how he died?
If I remember correctly, just like liver failure.
I'm trying to look it up because like tuberculosis is highly contagious.
Yeah, no, I don't think he died of tuberculosis.
But, yeah, he just was found in like a semi-conscious state.
Found in a gutter, basically, drunk.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The newspaper said congestion of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
Common euphemisms for death from disreputable causes such as alcoholism.
Right. Yeah. No, that's generally what it's, believed to be, is that he just died kind of a penniless drunk.
Yeah.
In the gutter.
Yeah. No one's sure. And he died at the age of 40. He died quite young, unfortunately. But yeah, so like everyone around him died and then he died.
And there's other, theories about other diseases it could be that it matches things. But that just seems the most likely, is that it was, again, this is just my best estimation, but that he was probably thinking of the bubonic plague to an extent in terms of how it spread and how to tell the story.
Yeah.
But that I think that the actual symptoms and the reason, like the impetus for writing it, was probably tuberculosis.
Yeah, he was. I mean, when you've seen so many people die from tuberculosis and then are watching your own wife die of tuberculosis.
Yeah.
Consumption, as it was known at the time. Right. It's hard to think that he wasn't inspired by it.
It has to be. Of course, you always have to have a little bit of a question mark on it just because it wasn't directly confirmed, but come on.
And I think it's clear that he did take from many diseases, and like the Red Death is a fictional disease, I would say, because we don't have anything quite like it that I know of. But he clearly was influenced by things. I just think it's so interesting that people die in like half an hour.
Very quick.
Which doesn't seem conducive for spreading a disease.
That's true.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, the way that they dealt with bodies and things back then.
Bring out your dead.
That shit was spreading all over the place.
Yeah, and rats.
And rats.
Rats were a big problem.
Yeah, there was just no separation of any of that stuff. So I don't know that the person even needed to be alive for it to matter.
That's true. Sanitation, especially for like a bacteria like tuberculosis.
Yeah.
There's still the bacteria in the body, so you could still get it.
Yeah. I mean, remember how late it was that germ theory came around.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's always so funny to me to watch, like, and I mean, much of it's played up anyway, but in some of these older movies, when people are talking about some, like, you know, horribly deadly disease, and they'll just get, like, right up in someone's face and be like, wow, look at those boils.
Yeah, they're like, can you breathe on me a little bit? I'm gonna taste this and see what happens.
But it's just like, yeah, I guess you didn't know, but it's...
Yeah, it took them forever to wear gloves and wash their hands in surgeries.
It's just so funny to me. It's like, it feels like such, I guess you just learned it at such a young age now that we know the science behind it, but it's just like, it feels like such an innate thing of like, maybe I shouldn't get near that, you know?
This is so crazy. Like, I'm thinking now about how morticians during the peak of the COVID pandemic had to put bodies in plastic bags to protect themselves from COVID while they were maneuvering them. And like, then they had to get in full PPE.
Yeah.
But like, they would talk about how you'd like be maneuvering the body and you could like see the air coming out of them and like steaming up the bag.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's germ theory, right?
It's happening. Yeah.
Obviously COVID is a virus, not a bacteria.
Yeah. But still.
But like, it's still something that's like alive and contagious in this person, perhaps.
Yeah.
And so it's just, yeah, you're totally right that like, like sanitation wasn't a thing. Rats were more rampant, more of a problem.
They're just grabbing diseased bodies, hucking them over their shoulder, you know, carrying them out and setting them all on fire in the middle of the town square, you know?
Absolutely. I just have to say also, one of the theorized reasons for Poe dying is rabies.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really, really interesting.
It is.
And honestly a little bit humorous.
Especially like just the type of things that he wrote about. There's
it's like
there's an irony in there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of an irony. I am not laughing that he died or that he may have died of rabies. I am laughing at the irony.
Look, we all die.
We all die.
You can laugh at it a little bit.
Which is one of the possible points of the Masque of the Red Death.
Yes, it is.
You
cannot escape.
Yeah, is that death is inescapable, and that perhaps Prince Prospero, I have such a hard time saying his name, is like supposed to be representative of Edgar Allan Poe himself and his own struggle with watching people die from tuberculosis.
Yeah.
So I just think, you know.
Yeah, these are people he probably tried to keep safe in his own way or whatever, you know, resources he had.
And he was trying to confront death and he could not. There's no escaping these things.
Yeah. And this is, I mean, such a common theme across all of his work is that death is coming for you. There's omens of it everywhere, you know, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell me a bit about these movies?
Yeah. So, again, I'll go more briefly with the 1919 movie.
Okay.
I will say that I found it a joy to watch.
Yeah.
You know, obviously it takes there's some hurdles to being able to enjoy a film that old.
Yes. You need a little bit more patience.
Yeah.
And need to be willing to sit.
There's a lot of value in them when you give it a chance.
Yeah.
And especially, I would say that even if you're like kind of iffy about watching these kinds of things, the German films from this time period are my absolute favorite.
Okay.
You know, this was definitely sort of, it's not, you know, full on like Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something, which is a movie I reference a lot just because it has such an effect on so many of the types of movies that we talk about.
Okay.
But that was released a year later, which is probably the most famous German expressionist film. And is often considered the first horror film.
Oh, okay.
I thought this movie was kind of fucking scary.
I mean, yeah, it is a horror. It's a gothic horror.
Yeah.
The story.
There's some, which again, this is like so loosely related to the actual Masque of the Red Death.
Yeah.
And so like, of course, like horror stories had been told for long before this, you know, but being put to film, This is a very early example. And so for this to be a year earlier than what is often cited as the first horror film,
yeah,
I was kind of amazed.
That's interesting. I guess maybe it would be better to say it as like the first film that really made horror genre.
Yeah, I would say so, because there's so much more going on here.
Yeah.
It's only a small part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's mostly just in the imagery. So like you're talking about how in that era things were always cranked up to 100, right? People's expressions are really vivid and expressed, and everything is just it's meant to try to pop out what they want you to focus on, right? So there's a lot of that in this movie. There's a lot of really scary expressions, and it just lingers on people's faces for like a really uncomfortable amount of time sometimes, making these like really horrific faces.
Wow.
And it's not even like the disease itself. This film is more treating, which I have some issues, I think, with some of the messaging it's trying to get across.
It is 1919.
Yeah. Like, for example, it's kind of all kicked off, like the catalyst for all of this is like a seductive woman coming to town.
The harlots bring the plague.
And it's not her that brings it, but it's like because of her presence and the way that her presence affects the day-to-day life of society in Florence, it's what allowed it to happen, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's very much like this isn't even me reading into it. They specifically talk about the parallels between Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay.
And Florence in this story.
Okay. I will say, like, there was a time when STDs were not as well controlled.
Yeah.
So, sex workers were perhaps a little bit dangerous.
Yeah.
There is certainly an aspect of sexism in all of that.
Definitely.
That's a huge part of it.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Also, STDs did spread.
Yeah.
And a really good way to get an STD is to sleep with a lot of people.
Right, of course.
So.
And this is like, I don't know, I'm so torn on it. I'm not entirely clear on what the intention, speaking of intentionality, I don't 100% know if that's what it's trying to communicate or not, because the woman herself is quite, she's treated quite well.
Yeah.
But it's the men around her, like especially the religious men, who keep talking about how she is clearly like a sign of the devil and this and that. And it's only really because of those reactions that anything happens. So that's found in the movie, but I don't know if it's trying to expressly say that or not.
She almost sounds like a very early femme fatale.
A little bit.
Like,
so she's just like, she comes and like the rulers, are, like there's this one guy that's in charge of the city, right? And he's, of course, directly linked with the church.
Yeah.
Like there's kind of this council of clergymen that rule over everything. And there's this one guy that's the head of them. And so his son is the one that first sees her during this like parade in town. And is kind of obsessed with her. And then the father also kind of becomes obsessed with her just for like a very short amount of time. So it's like, it's clearly showing something about that she is driving these men crazy.
Okay.
I think it's ambiguous in terms of where the film wants to lie the blame. But especially looking back at how ridiculous that notion is.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, you can certainly read it as that it's just these men convincing themselves something is wrong.
Yeah. Her ankles were showing.
Right, exactly. But her herself is like, she's just very friendly, and she just tries to do nice things for the townspeople and like get them to have fun, and kind of, she's not anti-religion, but she's like, you guys think about religion too much. You shouldn't do that. You know?
Interesting. So she's really, wow, she really sounds like a femme fatale.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah. So in Castle of Otranto, I have a hard time remembering that name for some reason. There's like a father and son duo where like the son is set to marry a woman, and then the father's like, no, I'm going to marry him.
Oh.
But I think the son actually dies.
Okay.
But like that was like, it just struck me that like, oh, a father and son obsessed with the same woman. And this one is like, a father is obsessed with this woman. So he wants his son to marry her.
Yeah, it's similar for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I obviously don't know if that was a direct inspiration or not, but it's worth noting.
Yeah.
And then, things kind of go on, and she, she kind of goes back and forth, like kind of blaming herself for certain things, especially like all the warnings that she keeps getting, all these warnings from religious people being like, you don't know what you're bringing on these people, and this and that,
Your feminism.
Right. And so she like, some of it's a little unclear. It's hard to follow sometimes,
Yeah.
Just because, again, like it's a lot of these silent films, it's a long scene of people talking and pantomiming and this and that, and then it gives you the dialogue, and you're like, okay, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
This one kind of skips over it sometimes.
Wow, so you really kind of have to be like, okay, they're talking about...
Yeah, you really have to pay attention to subtle things, and, of course, given the quality of video, sometimes it's hard, like, you have to know, like, this is the same character as this person before.
Oh, yeah.
And it can be a little hard, because a lot of them look pretty similar, and,
Yeah.
they're all blown out and stuff, so it's
Yeah.
hard to tell sometimes. But
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so she eventually, this other like kind of hermit that lives up the mountain is, very, very religious. Like he has like a giant Jesus cross in his cave and all this stuff,
Okay, I saw that.
Yeah.
Got that, like a scene of him like dragging it around.
Yes.
And he was being real dramatic.
Yeah, of course. But so he like basically is like horrified by what's happening and wants to make it right. But she ends up running into him and he allows her into his cave one day. She's like out, gets lost. She comes to his cave and he like gives her some food and water or whatever. But then they both have this vision where he prays to God to help her. And then this like wall in the back of the cave opens up and they go inside and they have all these visions. And so the last thing is that he envisions him and her together ruling over Florence.
What?
And so they actually make that happen. So he kind of, dismisses his religious ways in favor of going to party with her. And then he is eventually the one that feels so badly when he starts to feel guilty again.
Okay.
After all this has happened. And so he goes out into the world and sees that this plague is spreading and that they have kind of shut themselves in. But this isn't like a greed thing, so this is where the story really comes in.
Yeah, I was like, where?
So they basically shut the gates of Florence.
Okay.
To protect everyone inside.
Yeah.
They're not like shutting people out per se, but they're, just stopping the spread within the city, right?
Okay.
So no one in or out, basically.
Yeah. So they're not locking the rich people in a castle. They're trying to save the whole city.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So, and again, this is set in like the 14th century,
Yeah.
So this is very much supposed to be the Black Plague.
Yeah.
This is the time period that it was spreading throughout Italy. But so basically this hermit, he gets guilty. He escapes through the sewer. Mm-hmm. He goes out and starts trying to help everyone, that has the plague. Uh-huh. It's basically like anywhere that someone was with the plague, he was there, And so it's almost using him as like that kind of messenger of death thing, but he's just a person.
Yeah.
But then he ends up feeling that it is his duty from God to go back to the city and like bring the plague to them as kind of this holy retribution.
So he would be like...
So he's the one that goes back into the city.
Yeah.
And they're having a big party, and she is very excited to see him because she was basically in love with him. And then everyone dies. That's a very simplistic way to put it.
I mean...
But that's essentially what happens. But there's some really cool imagery in it. So it's like, it still follows that same thing of like a hooded figure. Yeah. But in this case, it's showing these people who they slightly make transparent on screen.
Ooh.
As they walk through like the city streets and along these roadways and things. And so you see them just walking towards the camera always. They kind of look a bit like zombie-ish. Like they clearly have some sort of makeup on. And like I said, they're slightly transparent. So they're kind of these like spirits.
Yeah.
That are being acknowledged by the people on screen. But as they pass through, everyone dies. you know.
Oh.
And so it's actually this really cool imagery that they use for that.
Yeah.
And then the coolest thing is that, like I said, they're having this party, and so there's this one figure that's like I described that's like coming from behind this man when he comes back to the city.
Ooh.
And then when he links up with this woman, the violin player that was playing just behind her at the party turns into this person, this figure, this spirit.
Okay.
You know, and then both of them die.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
It's cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think it's also a really good illustration of like how bizarre it is to do an adaptation of a story like The Masque of the Red Death.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
There's no hermit.
No.
There's no woman.
No, this one adds so much
yeah.
extra to it. It's clearly just using it as like a template.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is fine.
Yeah. But it's making very clear that it's talking about the bubonic plague and like this, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, they clearly do have some cool like touches to the original story with like the guy coming back and like in a way he's the Red Death, but then also the like ghost that's with him is also kind of like the Red Death.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely some really cool parallels to that. I would say like for the castle of Otranto,
every time.
The only similarity I really see is the like obsession with a woman.
Right. But I think that's a good call, actually. Like that seems like a potential link for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether intentional or not.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. It's just fascinating to see how people like take this and make it so their own. They take it and run with it. And like, I think that's a really cool adaptation. It sounds like.
And I think again, there's, I don't, you know, I'm not in the brain of Fritz Lang. I don't know what he was envisioning or why he decided to make it this woman that was kind of the catalyst. But I think that there's a lot of different ways you could read it. You could read it as pro-religion, like that it's the savior of humanity, that it's like a cleansing fire, or you could read it as totally anti-religious, you know?
Yeah. It kind of, so The Masque of the Red Death is actually kind of a political story. It's about these rich people locking themselves in a room and like being like, the poor people can die, but then they suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
All of them suffer the consequences.
Yes.
And in a lot of ways, when you think about it, the people outside probably had a better chance of survival than the people inside the abbey.
Yeah.
You know?
Because you can, as long as you keep it out, you're safe for a while, but like how long can you keep it out?
Yeah. And the moment it gets in,
you're done.
You're screwed.
That's it.
But this is almost like you're saying, is it pro-religion? Is it anti-religion? Is it like a feminist piece in a way? It's kind of presenting those same questions and like same ideas of separation and just maybe not the exact same ideas of it, but it's still a political piece in a way. And it's still examining different issues. And maybe it is one of those movies that seek to pose questions and let the audience try to figure it out.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
No, it effectively touches on a lot of the content that you could find or even read into in the original story.
Yeah, and then some. It really broadens the story. Yeah. It brings more political issues into it because I don't think there's a lot of religion in the story.
No, not inherently. There are in both film versions.
Yeah.
We'll talk about, but
yeah, and obviously in that time period, religion was quite big,
just ingrained completely.
Yeah, it was popular, so it makes sense that you would bring it in. But this one really does sound like it built on this core concept really interestingly and really well.
I would highly recommend it. I think that if it's at all of interest to people, it's a strong film. You know, again, I don't know how much people are going to want to try to, you know, use their Google Lens to translate dialogue, but it really was not that big of a deal. So
it's a unique watching experience.
It is. There also is a as far as I know, again, this is hard to find online digital copies of, but there is a Fritz Lang box that was released by Kino Lorber, and it's a Blu-ray box, I think, and it has this film on one of the discs.
Ooh.
So that is a good way to get it, but it's like an out-of-print box that's also hard to find. But if you can find it, that's probably the best way to get it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That they did that.
Yeah, well, they were heavily involved in the remastering of it, and like the preservation of it. So that's why.
Yeah, well, that's really. I mean, we talked last time about preservation a bit and how interesting it is and how valuable it is and hard it was.
Yeah.
So that's really, really cool to see that this. I mean, he's obviously a big director writer, but to see it being preserved and remastered.
But this again, like I think. Probably because he didn't direct it and because it was such an early film that people just don't talk about. Like I looked, I think it has like 500 watches on Letterboxd or something. Like,
wow.
Really, really little seen, at least in modern day context.
Yeah. Well, this is, again, I'm really glad we can talk about things like this and maybe do our part to kind of bring them back.
Right.
Into the zeitgeist.
Yeah. And again, I'm just like, I'm so fascinated by the things that it shares as like kind of a prototype of German expressionist horror that is, you know, that happened a year before this other film that's so much more widely seen.
Yeah.
I just found it fascinating. And I had taken this little clip just for you to see. Maybe we'll be able to post it in the show notes or something.
Yeah, we can put it on Instagram.
Just to give you an idea of kind of these expressions I'm talking about.
Oh, wow.
It's like evil shit.
Yeah.
So this is the leader that I was, the father figure that kind of led the clergyman.
Okay. Yeah, he's creepy.
I mean, this is just pure obsession.
Yeah.
Being shown on screens.
Yeah. We'll put that on Instagram. Future Allan, as you edit this, make sure you make a note of that.
Will do.
Or make a note of it now, present Allan.
But something else that I also want to talk about with this, the context of when this film was released. Think about what was going on in the world in 1919.
Well, it was the kind of turn of the world. I'm thinking America because it was like the turn of the Raging 20s were coming.
Yes.
End of the Edwardian period.
There was something that has drawn parallels to something that we have experienced exactly 100 years later from that.
Was it the Spanish flu?
The Spanish flu. This was at the height of the Spanish flu that this film came out.
You know, I was just thinking that like this is a really good like COVID's not over.
No.
You know what I mean? It's better in a lot of ways.
As a pandemic, it's over.
Yeah.
You know.
It still exists though. And I think this is one of those things that kind of like really harkens to like the people sitting in their little government buildings.
Oh yeah, well,
quarantining and not letting people in.
There's a couple of scenes in the 1964 film that I want to talk about that are very explicitly drawn to some modern day.
Ooh, okay, I'm excited.
You know, discussions of power and control and things like that. But that's
really interesting that this was released. And these back in the 1919s, back in that era, movie production times were not as long, correct?
It really just depends, but no, I mean, it costs so much money to do any of this stuff that, no, generally it was a shorter process, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, this was a long movie.
You're implying that they would have been well aware of what was going on when they decided to make this.
Well, I wonder if they did know. And I'm not saying that this was written in response to the Spanish flu, because that writing process and all can take ages.
Yeah, and I have no idea how long any of that took or when it got written, or I have no idea the intentionality again. But
yeah, but it makes you wonder, like, were they influenced during the creation process? Were they influenced during the release? Like, did the Spanish flu influence this film in any way?
How did people respond to it? It's such a scary time.
Yes.
You know, when we think of, you know, there were certainly pieces of media that came out during the height of the COVID pandemic, but especially like one of your favorites, Bo Burnham's Inside.
Yes.
You know,
yes. I love Inside.
You know, there were certainly pieces of media that were so directly related to those happenings, but a lot of the mainstream stuff, they didn't start mentioning COVID until a few years after, kind of when it felt like it was over.
Yeah.
You know?
And I mean, to be fair, like to all of those properties, and I think there were some movies that were even like, maybe we're going to delay this.
Yeah, some of it was like they just had to delay production because of the pandemic. Some of it was purposeful, I think, just because of content.
Yeah. And I think, when you're in the height of something like that, you don't really want to watch something about it.
You're looking for escapism.
Yeah. Like if you have planes flying over your house every day that you're afraid are going to drop bombs, you don't want to watch a movie about someone dropping bombs.
Right. Yeah, that's not helping your situation.
No.
Some works can give you perspective. Like I think Inside does that.
Yes.
It was helpful to view during that time period.
It was.
Even though it's sad in another way.
But there's also a difference between consuming a lot of fiction for escapism and then like, frankly, Inside is predominantly nonfiction and parody, and finding togetherness.
Yeah.
So there's also the difference between like if when you're in a hard situation, you don't necessarily want to watch that happen.
No.
But also finding community is really important. And sometimes that does involve exploring the situation you're in.
Yeah. Again, sometimes it can give you perspective that helps you.
Yes.
I would not think that a movie in which everyone dies would give you perspective that would be helpful.
No. It sounds a little doom and gloom.
Yeah, a little bit.
I would say that a lot of those ones you would like a movie like that's released in the height of the COVID pandemic. I would prefer to have a little bit of hope. But that's really interesting. I forgot that the Spanish flu was right then.
Again, like I didn't look into any kind of research again about like what the filmmakers had thought about that parallel or about how audiences responded to it. I really don't know. It's just like a super interesting point to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's super interesting. And it does make you think. Well, you searched through your notes. Something I remembered that I want to say is that the Masque of the Red Death, and I thought of this at the time, but in the Phantom of the Opera book.
Yes, I wanted to bring this up also.
Oh, good. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
The Phantom of the Opera dresses in a completely red outfit during a masquerade.
And this is in the novel.
Yes.
This was clearly a reference that Gaston Leroux wanted.
Yes, and I obviously didn't finish the book.
Oh, right. I forgot about that.
I really, really didn't enjoy it. But I just thought about that. And like, I mean, the Phantom is kind of this like bringer of horrible things, including death.
Yeah. Yeah. And those were, we talked about 3 of the film adaptations in our episode for Phantom of the Opera, and 2 of them portray that same scene.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Okay.
The 1925, Lon Chaney dons, towards the end of the film, he dons a red cloak.
I think that's the perfect time to do it.
And then also, believe it or not, in the 2004 musical, it's also found.
Gerard Butler? Wow.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
I don't remember if it's him that wears it or if it's just someone else at the party, but there's a very clear overt reference.
Okay. Yeah.
But it is missing from the, I forget what year it was, 49 film? 51 film, something like that.
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
The other one we talked about.
Yeah. That one was black and white, though.
Yes.
So.
But so was the 25 version.
Oh, well, duh.
Yeah.
No, they had color in the 1920s, and then
they got rid of the color in favor of talking.
Yeah. They went, we can have color or we can have talkies. Which do you want? And then they were like, oh, we can combine.
Right.
The Wizard of Oz came out, and they went, you could do both.
Yes. But yeah, so definitely an interesting note there to tie back to one of our previous episodes.
Yes. And I think now going forward, we'll probably see a lot more references.
It's referenced so much.
It's a hugely famous story.
Yeah. I mean, for only having arguably 3 major adaptations directly.
Yeah.
It is like, if you look at the list of things that it's been referenced in across movies, TV, comic books, video games, like everything.
Oh my gosh.
It's just ingrained because it is such a central piece of American writing.
Yeah. So, there's a whole article on Wikipedia about the Masque of the Red Death in popular culture.
Mm-hmm.
Usually that's at the bottom of the Wikipedia article, and there's a list of like, oh, this was in Grand Theft Auto 5.
Right.
You know, what's his name is reading the book.
And it's usually like a really loose references or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But this is like, so like, oh my God, we have literature, stage and screen, music, video. Oh my gosh, this video game list is really long. Other media, Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Like Doctor Who. It's a huge piece.
And some of it's like really, you know, it's like just something is named after it. Like the title is an homage or something. But a lot of it is like actual content or just imagery or something, you know.
Yes. And I mean, Edgar Allan Poe is one of the most influential American writers.
It's hard for me to remember if it was just the nature of my interests or if he really truly still held that much of a spot for people. But like he was one of the first writers that I remember like actively reading everything he wrote.
Yeah.
You know, as a kid.
Henry, bringing it back. I really hope he listens to this episode. I'm going to have to tell him. I think Edgar Allan Poe was like his introduction to horror.
Yeah.
And as a child, he was like reading
people.
it in bed and he was like terrified and he was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
I think that was him. If that's not, sorry. But that's someone's really good story.
And I mean, I'm sure that's a very common sentiment for people,
yeah.
You know. But I mean, just as a young child, like he was like the most important American writer ever to me, you know?
Yeah.
So it's fascinating. And again, for it to be such old writing, that's amazing for it to hold that attention.
Absolutely. And I mean, I like, who didn't study him in American English classes? You know, like outside of the US, sure. But like, I'm really curious, like, do I know anyone who didn't study Poe in high school? And if they didn't, are they remembering high school correctly?
Yeah. I mean, it's just so ingrained into so many things. I mean, for God's sake, the Baltimore Ravens, the NFL team, are called the Ravens because of Edgar Allan Poe being tied to Baltimore.
I did not know that.
Yeah. That's why that's their mascot.
So cool.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so ingrained into the culture.
Yeah. And I mean, I think this is kind of interesting, but Edgar Allan Poe lives on. His work lives on because he was such an amazing, evocative writer. And he had an emphasis on clarity. You know what I mean? We can still understand what he was saying.
Right. It's not like esoteric writing.
Yeah,
you know?
there are some, and language evolves. It's going to happen. But there are some things that you read from ye old times and you're like, what is this? And this is technically English, not Old English.
Right.
Old English is a different language. But he's clear and easy to understand. His stories are emotional. They take you on a ride. They're not too long. Like the Masque of the Red Death, really short. Yeah, it has a lot of description and stuff, but it's fast. It gets through it. You can read it quickly and easily. It's accessible, but it's still poetic and interesting. Lovecraft survives because his
Which is exactly the person that I wanted to bring up in response to this.
Oh, good. He survives because his ideas were kind of cool and unique, and a lot of times the first of their kind. But his writing was not that great, so we like to improve upon it.
Right.
Edgar Allan Poe survives as himself.
That's true.
Lovecraft survives as a genre that has been built upon.
Yeah, right. That makes a lot of sense because I feel like you hear just as much about Lovecraft. But yeah, you're right. You hear it as something being Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
You're not sitting there reading his work as much in schools.
Absolutely. And Edgar Allan Poe is like, let's put his book in this. Let's make a reference to Lovecraft. Literally is let's take this idea and change it.
Right. But that's exactly the parallel I was thinking to some of our earlier content is that, you know, we said the same exact thing when we discussed Call of Cthulhu.
Yes.
That it's like, I mean, there's only one major film adaptation of it, but it's referenced just endlessly across media.
So much. In fact, we 2023 played 2 games that were Call of
Mhm.
Cthulhu, Sinking
Yeah, I
City,
mean, it's just
and the
everywhere.
Call of Cthulhu.
Mhm.
Frickin' Sinking City is an amazing game.
Great game.
And you know what? Maybe we should do an episode, like a bonus episode on the video games,
Maybe.
just so I can play them again.
Yeah.
But that's like a perfect example is that these things are adaptations to be built upon.
Yeah.
And Edgar Allan Poe lives as himself.
Yeah.
I love Edgar Allan Poe. That isn't clear. He's my favorite poet. He's one of my favorite short story writers.
I mean, it's no surprise. Like, both of us definitely have an affinity for gothic horror. And
yeah.
He's one of the best to ever do it.
He's one of the OGs. And yeah, I mean, I feel really, really strongly about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Well, I'm glad you like it so much.
Okay. Tell me about the second movie that you watched.
Yeah. So this one, again, it's much closer of an adaptation, right? Like, you're getting all the pieces, like, by name, basically. By imagery, by name, everything is included that is in the story, at least for the most part. It's just expanding on it, right?
Yeah.
So it's not even like a different telling of it. It's just adding to, from what I can tell, at least. So essentially what you're getting is the last 20-ish minutes, which would make sense for how long you said it took you to read the story, is when you're getting that full-on, this is the story by Edgar Allan Poe.
Okay.
Everything leading up to that is some sort of alternate version, or it is, adding different elements to it. It does add a religious aspect to it, or you're exploring the type of person Prospero is.
Yeah, and we don't, in the story, the short story, we don't get a lot of backstory on Prospero.
Because you don't necessarily need it.
No, you don't. And when you're working in a longer format, you can do that.
Yeah. Which is not to say that, like, adding it takes away from the effectiveness of the story.
But it's not necessary.
But it's also not taking away from the original story that it's not there. You know? So, obviously this is helped tremendously by the fact that it's Vincent Price.
Yes, we love Vincent Price.
And this is honestly one of my favorite performances that I've seen him in.
You mean you didn't like him in Doctor, what's it called?
The what?
The doctor one where he doesn't move his face.
Oh, Dr. Fibes?
Dr. Fibes.
Oh, that one's fantastic, but that's just completely unhinged.
That's it.
Those are fantastic, but no, he has this really great, like, this role just fits him really well because he has such a, like, sadistic joy that comes across in it.
Yeah, and he loves face, like,
oh yeah,
he loves, I don't know what to say other than face acting, like facial expression.
Yeah, he has these great expressions, and so, like, yeah, you see him, like, giddy with joy by, like, torturing people basically in this story. So it really adds a lot to the character,
Yeah.
Probably the biggest addition here, which, like I said, it adds a religious tint to it, is that he is a full-blown Satanist in the movie.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he is obviously surrounded by a lot of very Christian people.
Yeah.
Many of the villagers nearby are Christians, right? But he is basically the leader of his own satanic cult. So he performs, like, that last black room with the red window you're talking about. That is his ritual room.
Wow.
Where he performs satanic rituals.
Wow.
Yeah. He's constantly referring to his, Dark Lord, and, he's denouncing Christianity and saying that it's a lie for, it's just trying to cover up the brutal, harsh realities of life. He's essentially taking all of this harshness in the world as proof that Satan is the true Lord of the world.
Wow, that is so unexpected.
Yeah.
But Vincent Price is so good at these off-the-wall characters.
It works, man. It really works. Like, it sounds a little silly.
It does, but like, knowing it's Vincent Price, part of me is like, this could be really fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not, maybe I can't take it. Maybe if I can't take it seriously, I'll still enjoy it because it's Vincent Price?
I think you can take it seriously.
You think so?
Though. Yeah, like it
Okay.
didn't really put me off in that way.
That's
Even though saying
fascinating.
it out loud, it's like it sounds like that.
It sounds ridiculous.
But it's not.
That's amazing.
So like essentially he, like I said, again, the lead up of this whole movie is that you're just seeing more of who he is, right? So it starts out where he is going through this very poor village on the way back to his castle.
Yeah.
And this is where he sees the first sign of the Red Death.
Okay.
You know, he sees this, he hears this old lady screaming and he's like, someone shut her up, you know? And so he eventually, like, she's still screaming, like several of his men have gone to try to shut her up, you know? And so she's still screaming. And so finally he's like, oh, you have to do everything yourself, you know?
Oh my God.
He goes and finds her, and this woman has now died with her face completely red, you know, from the Red Death.
So the Red Death is portrayed
Yes.
accurately?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not just like they painted her face red or something, you know, it's like these boils and sores and,
Okay.
you know, things like that, but it clearly has given like a red tint to her whole face.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, in a book, being like blood is coming out of their pores is really effective.
Yeah.
But if, as a makeup artist, I was trying to do that, I would be like,
You can't just like put little red dots all over the place, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh, they have the chicken pox or something.
Like, you have pores everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna need some close-up CGI,
Right.
You know. So yeah, I would say that's a good liberty.
You have
of
to go
adding
with
boils.
one of our favorite wrestling terms, the crimson mask.
The Crimson Mask. Yes. That's what I picture is Cody Rhodes.
Yes, exactly.
With his face covered in blood.
Anyway, but during that same trip, he sees this woman named Francesca, who he is immediately drawn to, right?
The House of Ortonato.
Just don't even try anymore.
We're gonna call it it's actually the castle. The Castle of O.
The Castle of O.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. That draws a parallel there, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so he like captures her, and it's a little unclear. It's two members of her family, definitely her father. I'm very unclear on who the second person is. It's either her brother or her husband. I don't know.
I saw about 5 seconds with her and these two people, and she said, "The man I love."
Still a little ambiguous.
It's still ambiguous despite that.
A little bit.
Okay. That's
There, I didn't write it down, and I don't remember exactly, but there were other like I was convinced it was her husband, and then things happened, and I was like, I don't know that that's her husband.
Oh.
Anyway,
that's not a good thing to be wondering about.
It's like it doesn't really matter all that much.
Yeah, okay.
The point is, it's two people who are in her family and are dear to her.
Yes.
Any of the details past that don't matter much.
Okay.
But so he takes her to his castle, basically. And, you know, having seen the Red Death, he's like, oh, well, we're just shutting ourselves in here, you know.
Okay, so that's very, very...
The same.
Yes.
You know, and then he starts sending out invitations to these other lords nearby and stuff. It's clear that he's maybe a bit more well-off than some of his quote-unquote peers nearby.
Despite being a Satanist in a very Christian...
Yeah, well, the point is that these people don't seem to really care.
Okay.
It's not about religion, right?
Yeah.
It's about status.
True.
And I think that that's actually a very poignant thing to notice, right? Like it's the religious aspect of it is all a sham anyway.
Yeah.
So,
they're feigning religion.
Yes. So they might lord those religious things and over morality of the people, but when it comes down to like your elite peers, it doesn't actually matter.
When it comes to like actual personal practice of religious tenets, they don't practice it.
Now, that said, I don't think that all of these people are aware of his proclivities.
Okay.
Yeah. He does keep it somewhat under wraps.
Okay, but he does have a ritual chamber.
Yes.
Okay.
That's just not like it's locked. It's locked up.
Okay.
You know, it's not part. So that aspect of there is the series of rooms of different colors that's portrayed in this.
That's awesome.
It is. It's very cool. Visually stunning. But it's not the same, like, they're not like flocking the party members through all these rooms to try to get them to the black room or something, you know.
Yeah.
So it is more of a secret, but he basically has this like courtesan already named Juliana. And she is in on the satanic rituals with him. She seems to be the only other one that is.
Okay.
And he lets Francesca in on it pretty early because she's very inquisitive. And she like kind of, you know, comes across it on accident, and he's like basically trying to convert her from Christianity to Satanism throughout this movie.
Curiosity in young innocent women is like a gothic horror. Like that is like that is like adding salt to a soup.
Yeah,
you know, you gotta have it.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things where he very sternly is like, "Don't go behind that door."
And then she goes behind
and then she goes behind the door, and she sees all the ritual stuff. Anyway.
I know it's like a silly, like he said, don't go behind the door. Don't go behind the door, you idiot. I freaking love that.
Yeah.
I love when she goes behind the door. I want to write so many stories where she goes behind the door. Like, oh, I love it.
Which, you know, I don't remember exactly. It's like she's very, it's not just curiosity, in other words. She feels in danger.
You have to have a little bit.
Yeah. She wakes up, you see like a shadowy figure moving throughout her room. And she wakes up and then sort of looks around, and then she spots blood on her end table by her bed.
Ooh.
And then she hears noises coming from behind that door.
Ooh.
So that's why she goes to investigate.
Yeah. So that's like
pretty fair.
In Jane Eyre, there's like the woman screaming in the attic. And they go into the attic, or she like at somehow. Oh no, actually the woman runs out of the attic. But like there's the attic you're not supposed to go into, and that's like a big thing.
Right.
In The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, she's like not supposed to go in the room. Actually, in Dr. Moreau, period.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to go into the room.
Right.
But also in The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, she's not supposed to go in the room. It's like very like, oh, mwah, I love it. And then it has to be someone was screaming. There was blood. Like, oh my gosh, I want to see this movie so badly.
Oh my God. Anyway, so I won't go into all the details about all of this. There's, just some things to touch on. There's clearly a tinge of jealousy between, like, Juliana was clearly kind of like the apple of Prospero's eye. And then he brings this new girl in, and he's like, hey, I need you to get her dressed in your clothes. And also, I'm kicking you out of your room, and she's going to sleep here.
Ooh, okay.
And, all these things start to happen, right? So that's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
So Juliana ends up, even though she is like a literal Satanist doing rituals and trying to invite a demon to the castle, she is, in fact, there is a scene where it's not explicit. She makes love to Satan. Again, not explicit. It's just her like doing a ritual and kind of writhing around. But the implication is very clearly that she talks of how she wants to marry Satan. Again, this is more well done than you think it is.
This is fascinating. I am just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, again, none of that is really important. It's just the fact that, like, she ends up siding with Francesca in a weird way because she wants to take revenge on Prospero.
So girl power.
Girl power a little bit.
Okay.
Which none of that really, like, fully plays out. He ends up finding out about it, and it doesn't matter. But, like, she does actually try to help Francesca escape.
So that's kind of nice because so many people, particularly men, like to write about female jealousy, and having it be like there's like I was like, oh great, there's female jealousy. Two women, one of them's jealous.
No, it makes a lot of common sense.
Yeah, but it becomes like I'm not fighting you,
right? He's
the problem.
No, she's like, well, I don't want you here because I'm jealous of you now. But you don't want to be here anyway. Yeah. So I'll help you get away.
Yeah, we have a solution.
Right.
We're not like, I'm not going to, like, you don't have to be, like, if your partner cheats on you, you don't have to like the other person.
Yes.
But the problem's not the other person, it's your partner. And you two can team up and humiliate them on Instagram, right? Like, this is what it is.
Oh, my gosh. Anyway, so there's, a couple other things that are shown that are both kind of funny and also just help to build the character. So, it shows like he has this whole like court of entertainers basically. And so this actually incorporates a different Edgar Allan Poe story into this, which is Hop Frog. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
I'm not familiar with it.
I think it's another very short story where it's essentially just like there is a dwarf man who is in basically the same situation. Like he's an entertainer for a court.
Okay.
And something happens where he's mistreated by this king or whatever. And so during a party, he gets the king to dress up and one of the other lords that had been mean to him. He gets them to dress up in a gorilla suit and then lights them on fire.
Oh, okay.
And so this is incorporated into this story where there is one of the lords that gets invited by Prospero, slaps what seems to be his romantic interest, who is the woman dwarf.
Okay. Who
is part of this entertainment. So they're like, he sings and dances and things and she dances, right?
Okay.
For Prospero.
Okay.
And of course he's... What?
Not to cut you off, but I think the preferred nomenclature now is little person.
Okay.
Just so you know. I know you're not trying to say it. I just wanted to make sure you knew.
I think dwarf is acceptable too, isn't it?
I've primarily been hearing most of them go towards little person.
Okay.
But I'll just say
I've also heard people say that they hate that term because it sounds
It
demoralizing.
I know. So like, I don't know. Someone tell us.
I am going off the fact that it is still medically referred to as dwarfism.
That's true. Okay. Do continue. We're going to acknowledge that we are aware there is a conversation about
if
the nomenclature.
anyone is upset by that, please let us know.
Yes,
and I will actually take it into account.
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, so this also was particularly funny because I didn't understand who this woman was supposed to be.
Okay.
So the male is played by an actual dwarf actor.
Yes.
The woman is a 10-year-old girl.
What the?
And so I was so confused because she doesn't even speak until towards the end of the movie.
Okay.
So at first I'm thinking, and the way that Prospero is looking at her is like she's like some sort of sexual prize of his. So I'm like, is this man like having sex with this like 10-year-old girl?
Is there pedophilia all of a sudden?
And then I realize later on when she finally speaks and her voice is that of an adult woman that's being piped in.
Is it literally dubbed over?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Then I was like, oh, she's also a dwarf.
So they couldn't find a woman with dwarfism?
Of course they could. I don't know what the reasoning for this is, but it was so confusing to me at first.
Oh my god.
So anyway, retroactively I pieced together that these two dwarves were, I mean, I don't know if they're romantically interested or what, but they were looking out for each other in some way, right?
Yes.
And so she is dancing and spills the cup of wine of one of these lords, and he gets very upset and slaps her to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so this other dwarf has taken much offense to this.
Mm-hmm.
And so later on, when Prospero starts acting a bit different towards even the other lords, this lord is like, oh, well, I need to get back at him. And he comes and talks to this dwarf, the male,
mm-hmm.
about, oh, do you want to help me like conspire against him? And he plays along with it, only to make the plan to where he gets put in a gorilla suit that's supposed to be distracting the party. But instead, the dwarf ties him up and lights him on fire.
Oh my god!
As payback for slapping the woman earlier on.
That's amazing.
Yeah, really something. But all of that is essentially the plot of Hop Frog.
Yeah. I looked up Hop Frog while you were talking, and the plot summary is longer than the plot summary for the Masque of the
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is just like a little bonus thing in the movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was just like a little extra piece that came together, but
that's really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So everything else is kind of just like showing how big of an asshole Prospero is and kind of the way he thinks. And so there's definitely like an element of, like, obviously you don't agree with him specifically, but he makes some points about like the hypocrisy of Christianity, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So he's talking about, Francesca is like, I'm a Christian. You can't get me to stop being a Christian. Like, why do you think that like torturing these people is okay? He has like this dungeon that they're walking through when they're having this conversation.
Okay.
And he has like people tied up on the rack and stuff, including her family. And so she's like, how can you justify this? How do you think this is okay? And he's like, well, do you know how this dungeon was built? It was built by one of my ancestors who was a devout Christian and part of the Inquisition. And he tortured hundreds and hundreds of people in this dungeon in the name of Christianity. Yeah. So how is what I'm doing any worse? Mm-hmm. He's like, he's convinced that at least he's being realistic about it.
Yeah.
You know, he's not trying to masquerade as something else. You know, he is being his true self in the form of Satanism.
Yeah.
So there is that like element of it that's how it brings the religious aspect into it. Yeah.
Okay. So it's definitely, this one sounds like, and I'm sure you have more to talk about, but this one sounds like maybe a little bit more of a blatant conversation about religion as opposed to the 1919 one where we're not sure.
Very much, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all open because again, it's like the first thing he does when they arrive at the castle is she has a crucifix around her neck and he takes it from her.
Okay.
You know, so it's very much built into, and again, he's like trying to convert her the whole time and like make her realize that like, hey, your God's not going to help you, and at least like Satan is, you know, realistic about how the world works.
Uh-huh.
So but yeah, and then there's just a couple other really interesting ways that it like kind of portrays the way he looks at power and control.
Yeah.
So he does falconry, and
where have we heard that before?
He is talking about how when you are training a falcon, they sew their eyes closed to confuse them until they break.
Okay.
Because they have to, and I don't know if this is how falconry was actually done at some point in time.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But I kind of would believe it.
I mean,
so he's basically saying that like they're too stubborn, so you have to sew their eyes closed until they are forced to succumb to your will, and then they will serve you.
This kind of sounds like people who are, so there's two main forms of truffle hunting.
Okay.
One is where you praise the dog, you treat it super well, you make it all happy, it's living the life of luxury.
Mm-hmm.
The other is that you basically starve the dog and it only eats when it finds truffles.
Right.
Obviously, we're kind of skewing toward one over the other nowadays. Mm-hmm. We're seeing
the
more
torturous one, right?
Yeah. No, we're seeing more humane approaches to animal training. But this makes me think of that because I'm also like you could just like be like, look how good your life is here to the falcon.
Yeah.
Like how many wild animals are like, no, my life's pretty good. I'm not going to attack someone.
Well, again, we've clearly proven that you don't have to do that anymore to train a falcon. But,
yes.
You know, which I'm not up on the latest trends of falconry and how it's performed.
I'm not either.
You know, that's an old hobby of mine.
Yeah.
Not a current one.
I will say, honorable mention kind of thing here. The hats the falcons are wearing.
Oh, yeah. Amazing.
Oh, my gosh.
They're very stylish falcons.
That's another 5 seconds of the movie I saw. So freaking
like a feathered
cute.
Plume on this hat of the falcon.
It's like it's wearing a little leather cap, and then there's this thing that sticks straight out the top, and on the top of that there's like this little yellow burst of feathers. It's so freaking cute.
I forgot that you were there for that scene.
I didn't hear them at all. I just saw the falcon and I was like, that's all I care
about. But yeah, so obviously there is kind of a parallel here of, you know, exerting a certain amount of control and taking away certain abilities from people, and, you know, it forces them into a state of submission, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's obviously something that we see a lot of in our current modern day world.
Yeah.
And has kind of always existed.
You know, I'm thinking about this falconry thing still. We have blinders for birds.
Yeah.
So that they don't like panic or whatever.
Yeah.
If they could make a
I think they do that for falconry now that you mention it.
They do.
Yeah.
Or they put them in like boxes or whatever, you know. They could have made those back then.
Yeah, but they didn't think about, I mean, again, like.
No, but here's the thing. Sewing their eyes shut is so much harder than making a hat.
No, I know.
So
But remember, the cruelty is the point.
No, I'm not I'm not disputing why they did it in the movie. I'm saying maybe it's not historically accurate.
Oh, I have no idea.
That like in ye old days, it would be so much easier to put a freaking bag over it.
Yeah, I know. But it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Absolutely does not. It is the cruelty of it. You're correct. It got me thinking. And then I started thinking about, wow, I can literally put a bag over the bird.
Anyway.
Sorry.
So he's clearly, this is not just a parallel to just the nature of power in general, but this is like a tactic that he's literally using on her, right? Like he is shutting out the rest of Francesca's world. He's captured her family. Like he has done these objectively horrifying things to her. And he is trying to still slowly like convert her to his side. And it sort of works here and there.
Okay.
Where she sort of loses her way a little bit. But anyway, that was an interesting scene in the same way that it's presenting that level of like elitism and control.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's another great scene, which is towards the end. It's during the masquerade. He is like up on his little, pedestal thing. Like it's not like a throne, but he has like a raised platform above the main area.
Like a dais?
I guess, yeah.
Okay.
And all of the other nobles are down on the floor, right, partying during this masquerade ball. And he starts just throwing like diamonds and other jewels onto the ground and watching them like scramble for them.
Yeah.
And he makes a comment about how like even though they're already wealthy, he's still able to control them like this. Like and he describes it as like starving men scrambling for a scrap of bread.
Yeah.
And that's the same kind of thing like again, I try to not like get too political on this podcast.
It's hard sometimes.
It's hard, and especially when things are just
they really just coincide.
So it really makes me think of like some of these very rich billionaires that we currently have that are like, I mean, in my opinion, like groveling at the feet of our president.
Yes.
In a way that makes them look just absolutely pathetic.
Because they really don't need to.
And they don't need to. That's the whole thing about it. They're already so ludicrously wealthy. This is just to get like a little extra number on their bank account.
Yeah, or like a little ego boost or like something.
A little ego. But how can you even get an ego boost when you're literally groveling in front of someone?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's just absolutely pathetic to me. But I really, that struck the shit out of me when that scene happened. Where I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. No, that's, I definitely get that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's just like, so this is all, again, just like building this character of who Prospero is, where he's, this is all just entertainment for him.
Mm-hmm.
He has this power and control and he's going to use it.
Yeah.
And so really the whole like Satanist side of things is kind of secondary to all that at the end of the day,
Okay.
But, so then basically the same ending happens, all of a sudden, he had made very clear, like no one is to dress in red during this party because he had heard this talk of like a red figure, cloaked figure going throughout the land.
Oh, okay. Like bringing death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so I think that you maybe had caught a glimpse of that, but at the very start of the movie, it starts with a red cloaked figure sitting under a tree reading tarot cards.
Oh, no, I don't think I saw that.
So this is like the visual representation of this. And then at the end of the movie, all of these figures of different colors come and talk about how they have like culled these populations or, whatever. And they've spared these certain people or this or that, so they are the plague, right? Like these men, which it's also like, reminds me of the thing in the 1919 film.
Yeah.
Where, these figures are passing through, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a physical representation, which is of course inherently in the story, but
it makes me think of like the Four Horsemen.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, there's more of them than that, but it's the same idea. Yeah. So yeah, but so this red figure shows up at the party. He's like, "You're not supposed to do that." Whatever. He's trying to figure it out, and he's kind of chasing this figure throughout the party, and eventually it comes face to face with him. And everyone starts to die around him. And then in this case, which I think in my personal opinion, is a bit weaker than the actual story. He uncovers it and sees his own face.
Oh, that's so Vincent Price, though.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, that feels like really on brand. Like he was like, or it could be nothing, or it could be me.
Yeah.
And I see myself.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is the second time I've thought of this. The Ingmar Bergman movie about death.
The Seventh Seal.
The Seventh Seal. And Vincent Price seeing himself as death.
Mm-hmm.
We just watched a Bob's Burgers episode where the documentary guy is making a movie and he's like, I'll play death. No one's ever done this before. And Bob goes, oh, you mean
that's
Ingmar
right.
Bergman?
Yeah.
And he's like, and I'm going to play death.
Yeah.
And they're going to be like, so you're going to see yourself?
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly it.
Like, this is the Masque of the Red Death Bob's Burgers episode. Why didn't we do that?
Well, we did watch it just recently.
We did watch it, yes.
This is now part of this conversation.
It is. It absolutely is. But yeah, that's a great scene.
Oh, God. Really funny. But yeah, so then it just, it kind of ends with this figure kind of right before he kills him. He's basically just pointing out that no matter what you think you serve or how powerful you think you are, like death comes for all of us and you can't escape it.
So that's Vincent Price talking to himself.
Exactly. He says to him, death has no master. Because what's happening up to that point is that Prospero is convinced that this figure is a messenger from Satan who has finally come to like bless him for his service.
Oh.
Just before killing him himself.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's when he like pulls off his cloak and is, death has no master, and then he dies.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that.
I like everything except for it being him.
I almost feel like someone else should have said the line while he was dying. Like, it would be really cool if Francesca was like, death has no master. And like, she's spared.
Yeah. She is spared.
Which is good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm gonna have to see it. And obviously I'm gonna watch this movie.
It honestly works really well for me.
Okay.
Just I think it's more effective for the cloak to reveal that nothing is underneath.
Yeah.
Than for it to be him.
And Vincent Price totally could have done some like death has no master. Like he still could have done the voice.
Yeah.
I
mean, he did a little bit.
Yeah, but like it didn't have to be him.
Oh yeah. Of course,
it could have just been him doing a different voice.
Yeah.
And then we're not like, oh, it's Vincent Price and Vincent Price. You're like, ooh, it's nothing, but it has a voice. Like that would be a little spookier.
But I will say there's a lot of really good lines in this movie.
Yeah.
Like that. Like I said, that the last part works for me. It does.
Okay.
It really works well.
All right. Do you have any other lines you want to highlight?
Well, they also, I think that the same figure just before that, he's like, why should you be afraid to die? Because your soul has been dead for a long time.
Ooh.
Pretty good. Another one that caught my attention was right after the scene where Juliana, what's the word I'm looking for?
Makes communion with the devil.
Communion with the devil, yes. She says, I've tasted the beauties of terror.
I've tasted the beauties of terror.
Which I quite liked. And then the whole film ends with, which I didn't write it down. I'm sure you have it maybe or remember it. But the last line of the book or the story.
Oh, I actually don't have it in front of me. Let me pull it up. As I'm pulling this up, I want to say that PoeStories.com has really, really done a really good job of putting this story out there with like definitions and stuff like that. It's a really, really good place to read this story.
Great.
Even though I have a tome of Edgar Allan Poe.
You and your tomes.
I know. The last sentence, and darkness and decay and the Red Death held illimitable dominion over all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's the last line of the movie?
Well, it's just flashed up on the screen.
Okay. And darkness, decay, and Red Death are all capitalized, which I really love.
Yeah.
I really, really love that.
Yeah. So it's, I mean, again, it's, I think there's many ways that this can be read into, but just the inescapable nature of death.
Yeah.
Certainly a very big part of it.
Very blatant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, tied in with the fact that, like, in other words, I look at it as death is the great equalizer.
It absolutely is.
In a world of inequality, it is the one and only true power of equality.
Oh, it totally is. Yeah, it really is.
And you can't run away from it no matter how much power or money you have.
Yeah. And that's like true in like every religion and non-religion. Like it is the equalizer.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're atheist, you're all on the ground.
Yep.
If you're Christian, you're going to get your comeuppance.
Mm-hmm.
If you're maybe in Hinduism with reincarnation, you're going to come back as what you deserve.
Right.
Or reach nirvana.
Right.
So I think that, in every possible way, that's totally true.
Yeah. Which is especially funny to me, just given the, which it makes so much sense now as an adult, but it always confused the hell out of me as a child, where the type of church that I grew up in was very much like, your deeds on earth do not matter.
Yeah.
You simply repent once, basically.
Yeah.
You swear an oath to Jesus, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You're pretty much off the hook. Like, they're like, try not to sin, but we're human, we're going to sin a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just such an easy cop-out.
Yeah.
It
is.
But
yeah.
I think that this is very much that, like, your deeds and works do matter.
They do, because it's what you have at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Again, regardless of what religion or non-religion we're talking about.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So even there's even people who you might not be like a full-blown Satanist performing rituals and torturing people or something, which, again, we'll just say, like, that is not what the Church of Satanism actually is in the modern day.
They do not condone torture.
But, like, even with that, you can have the same sentiment. Like, that's just something I've heard before of, like, well, at least I'm, like, based in reality. Like, yeah, I might do evil shit, but, like, at least I'm not lying to myself about it.
Yeah.
And there's an element of truth in that, for sure.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's not going to save you either.
No.
And that's what, Prospero was clearly convinced of in this version.
Yeah. And I think that message holds true in the story as well, is like, your deeds matter. And Prince Prospero in the story tried to do all this very selfish stuff. And what did he get for it?
Mm-hmm.
The Red Death, and he died
Yep.
in a horrible and painful way, and I think it's exactly the same thing of like, what you have is what you do,
mm-hmm.
and what you do matters, even on a small scale.
Yeah.
It really does. So, I guess if there's a moral to this podcast, it's that what you're doing does matter.
Yeah, sure.
even the tiny little things matter.
Right.
They do, sometimes it feels like they don't. Sometimes you feel like you're fighting an endless battle.
Yeah.
But it does matter. And you are making a difference somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
It matters.
And that not to use the excuse that this is just the way things are, or if I don't do this, someone else will, to take advantage of someone or do something bad. Like, such a commonly heard excuse.
Yeah.
But it doesn't justify it.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And honestly, if you're not going to do it, you don't know that someone else will.
That's true.
You might as well do
that
it.
Assumption is what makes it true.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, that's like, to kind of bring some levity to this conversation. As a writer, so many writers write the stories they want to read.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to exist unless we write them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying if you don't want to be a writer, you do not have to go out and write a story that you want to read if you don't enjoy writing. Mm-hmm. But it is to say that that story will not exist if you do not bring it into the world.
Right.
So you doing things matters, because you cannot trust someone else to do it, especially if you haven't asked someone else to do it.
Yeah.
How many times have we made assumptions? Like, I remember the most recent one was like, I asked you when you had changed the bath mats last, and you were like, I thought you were doing it. And we hadn't had a conversation about it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, one of us should have done it.
Yeah.
Because the other person didn't do it.
Right.
And, or we should have asked the other person to do it. Like it, and that's just like a super small, like doesn't matter example, but it just shows that even the small things, like, it matters. So you should do the thing that you've been thinking about doing.
Yep. But yeah, I think that's all I have.
Yeah, I think these are very interesting movies.
Yeah.
I think that they build on this story in really interesting and unique and similar ways.
I'm really happy I watched both of them.
I definitely want to watch the Vincent Price one. I don't think I have the patience for the 1919 one.
Fair.
Especially having to watch it with Google Lens.
I did, I mean, now that you know the basics of the story, I did find somewhere on YouTube, like just like a 20-minute compilation of scenes.
Okay.
Which could be worthwhile for anyone that's like interested in dipping their toes.
Okay, maybe we can put that in the description or something.
I didn't watch it, but that's what it looked like. Is it was just some of the kind of interesting standout moments.
Okay, cool. We'll try to check it out, and if it's good, we'll maybe put it in the comments or something like that.
But yeah, so I think that both of these films did some interesting stuff with it. I would argue that the 64 version is the better adaptation.
Yeah.
Just because it's directly dealing with it so much more.
Yeah.
But both of them are very worthwhile parts of the conversation.
Yeah.
And I would put them roughly on the same standing in terms of how much I liked both films.
Okay. But here's the real question. Was the book better than the movie?
I don't know. Probably.
I don't know. I think the book is better.
Yeah.
But I think that goes back to the like Lovecraft Poe conversation.
Yeah.
Of like Poe is just gonna endure.
Yeah.
And these movies are probably in some ways like no fault of their own, relics of their time.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that they're not going to age well, but like a 1919 movie, it's like just not going to age as well as this story has aged.
No, not at all.
And I think that it's like a source material that's just so valuable, and it covers all the same topics, and you can read it super fast.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like so easy to just go, it's no time commitment at all.
Yeah.
Both of these other movies are 90 plus minutes.
Yeah. It's free on postories.com, I think I said. I highly recommend reading it if you like it. But yeah, I think I'm going to have to say the book is better than the movie.
Yeah.
But that the movies are good.
They're good.
And they're worth watching, especially if you're a Poe fan and a Vincent Price fan.
Yes.
If you like Vincent Price, definitely check it out.
Yeah. No, I was very happy with both of these.
Good. And I want to watch the Vincent Price one. So do show that one to me shortly. I think that about sums up our thoughts. Mm-hmm. But before we sign off, Allan, it's time for a game.
Let's have it. I know you've been working on updating your list.
I have a longer list. My list was getting really sparse and I was really scrambling.
Let's see. If it's anything like last episode, I'm going to preemptively guess The Seventh Seal.
I have a confession.
What?
I didn't even know that movie was called The Seventh Seal.
Oh, okay.
So no, you're wrong.
Damn.
That's not even on the list yet. I'll put it on the list though. No, I think you can get this one.
Okay.
I think you can get this one. Are you ready?
Yeah.
The D is silent. Payback won't be.
Django Unchained.
Yep. 2012 dark comedy period drama starring Jamie Foxx, Christopher Waltz, and Leonardo DiCaprio, where he famously sliced his hand open while they were filming and went on with the scene.
Did you know
that
Viggo Mortensen
broke his toe? We say that every time we watch Lord of the Rings, and it doesn't matter which one we're watching or if it's that scene. We just go, "Did you know?"
A classic.
With the help of a German bounty hunter, a freed slave sets out to rescue his wife from a brutal plantation owner in Mississippi. I think this is a great movie.
It is a good movie.
It's a really good movie.
Yeah, there's some great scenes in it.
Yeah.
Possibly the most confounding self-insert of Quentin Tarantino in one of his movies. But
he makes a...
Oh, yeah, you don't remember?
I do not remember. Tell me.
He's the Australian slave trader.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. I do remember this. Okay.
It's also funny, one of the few cameos he makes where he does not say the N-word, even though it seems like the one that it would make the most sense.
Oh my gosh. That's I already was like, well, how do I feel about Quentin Tarantino?
Oh, I feel very mixed on him, but I like his movies.
That's where I was like, how do I feel about this guy? And the fact that you just said that made me be like, yeah, he as a person maybe could use a little
questionable
work. Yeah, he could use a little work, but that's probably a conversation for another adaptation.
He also recently said that, I might be slightly misquoting here, but that no real films have been made since 2019.
No real films.
Yeah.
These are all fake films.
Which ironically is when his last movie came out.
Oh, I wonder if there's a little ego stroking there going on.
But anyway, just leave the man alone, okay? So what? He likes feet and saying the N-word.
And putting Uma Thurman in danger?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That was a while ago, I guess.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
He's done some questionable things. He is allowed to like feet.
Yeah.
Saying the N-word is maybe...
Again, maybe goes too far with it sometimes.
Yeah, he could stand to maybe say it less
Well,
often.
I meant the feet thing.
oh, the feet thing he goes too far with? Yeah, but you know what? That's like a harmless thing.
Well...
Okay, well, again, has Quentin Tarantino done any adaptations?
The part where he cast himself in a cameo... in a scene in which he licks the bottom of Salma Hayek's feet is maybe taking it a step too far.
Yeah, that might be a little bit far.
Anyway.
But has he made any adaptations that you can think of off the top of your head?
No.
I don't know.
No, he's a pretty original script kind of guy.
So maybe we won't talk about him in the future.
I could be wrong and misremembering something, but yeah, any of the ones that are popping into my head are not adaptations.
Okay, well, let us know
Yeah.
in the comments or find us on Instagram or whatever. That's all for now.
Yeah.
Allan, you did a great job on the quiz today.
Thank
was
you.
Definitely a record.
I feel great.
Thank you for listening to In Contrast. I'm Nisha.
I'm Allan.
Let us know what you think and your opinions. You can find us at In Contrast Pod on Instagram. We definitely want to hear from you this time. We had a lot of questions for people. Mm-hmm. Next up, we'll rate, review, and talk about Water for Elephants.
Oh, you chose, huh?
Yeah, I did choose. And I was honestly sitting here going back and forth. I almost said Frankenstein.
Oh.
But we've done a lot of Gothic horror lately.
Yeah, that's also going to be a big episode.
Yeah. So,
and I want to wait for Guillermo del Toro's adaptation.
There's a lot. So that I decided we'd do Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen.
But this was, so you are about to leave on a trip for quite some time.
Yes, I am. When this comes out, I'll be back.
Yes, but you'll be coming back in time for your birthday.
Yes, and this was my birthday choice.
This was your gift.
Yes.
You get to choose this next episode.
Yes, and just a little preview. I watched this movie because I met one of the actors who was in the movie, and I will be telling you that story.
Of course. Hint,
it takes place in Hawaii. So I will tell that story in the next episode. Until then, whatever. We'll ask the important question, is the book really better than the movie?
Bye-bye.